The United Kingdom has an epic history and a wealth of secrets still to uncover. Every year, hundreds of archaeologists dig, dive, and sieve to find clues, to add to the great historical jigsaw of our ancestors' lives.
You know when people say, what's the best thing you've ever found? Guys, this.
I'm Professor Alice Roberts. This year we've uncovered some astonishing finds and made some truly groundbreaking discoveries.
Wow, look at that.
Each team of archaeologists has been armed with a dig diary camera so they can record their discoveries as they happen.
That is brilliant. Dave, I love you.
Our roving archaeologist, Dr. Naoíse Mac Sweeney, is out on the digs.
Who are we looking at?
It's royal.
And I'll be inviting the teams to bring in their finds for closer analysis.
That is absolutely beautiful.
This time we're exploring the south of Britain, where archaeologists have been making incredible discoveries both above and below the waves. From a Stone Age settlement found off the Dorset coast,
incredible sight. You know, nothing else like it in the country.
To an Elizabethan theatre in the heart of London.
This must have been such a raucous place. It's kind of 16th century EastEnders.
And a mysterious Iron Age burial near Dorchester.
I've been working in Dorset for over 40 years and I've never come across anything like this.
Welcome to Digging for Britain. After the invasion of Britain in 43 AD by the Roman Emperor Claudius, it was here in the south that the first forts and settlements grew up. Archaeologists in East Sussex are out investigating one of these early settlements, but with no Roman records of this place, its name and its purpose have been lost in time. The excavation is located around 10 miles northeast of Brighton, in the village of Barkham. The site was first discovered in 2011 by chance. Archaeologist Rob Wallace was excavating part of a Roman road when a wider geophysical survey revealed a possible settlement.
This survey is magnetometry, so it picks up the magnetic variations in the earth. Especially in the Roman period and other periods, you tend to get a lot of charcoal and burnt material, which is very magnetic. So these will show up ditches, linear features. So the geophysics we use is an indication that there's something there, rather than actually telling us what it is there.
Artefacts already uncovered suggest this settlement was already in existence by 70 AD, just 27 years after the Roman invasion. With no historical records to help us here, Rob is trying to work out the role this settlement might have played in the wider context of Roman Britannia. He looks first for clues in its layout and location.
Original settlement around about 70 AD is round here, and it's a small 4-grid system. The Roman road, which goes to London, comes up through here. We have the Greensand Way, which is the east-west route, which goes to Hardham and then Chichester. And we have a road going eastwards to Arlington and then on to Pevensey.
As well as the roads heading off in all directions, the settlement is also very close to a waterway.
The River Ouse is a tidal river. It was probably a lot wider and shallower in the Roman period. The Romans would have used flat-bottom boats anyway, and it's an easy way to move mass bulk. So possibly grains and things like that, iron ore that's coming out from the Weald.
While the Romans are famous for their road building, waterways were just as important. They used seagoing merchant ships to transport goods in and out of the country, and river barges for transporting goods within it.
So you can move stuff in mass. They can move around the rivers rather than on carts, which is more costly and time-consuming. So basically we have north, south, east and west covered from this location.
This is a key revelation. The site was well connected by roads and river to other Roman settlements in the region. The team also discover that the site itself is surrounded by a ditch.
If we look out here, you'll see that hedgerow, which goes all the way up to that corner. It's then coming all the way up, 3/4 of the way up to there. That hedgerow is this enclosure ditch, is the inner enclosure ditch. It then comes back across the site, it levels up with the oak tree and comes down to form this around it.
The ditch suggests a certain level of fortification. It meant that you could only get in through approved entry points. The ditch was a way of controlling who and what came in and out of the site. Further clues to the role of this settlement come in the huge variety of artefacts that are being unearthed, including over 300 coins.
So here we have a Septimus Severus coin, around about 198 to 200 AD, which is silver from this year's excavation. Yeah, so there's quite a collection. They date from early Roman right the way through to 435 AD.
Along with the coins, evidence is also building of a site rich in material goods coming from all over Britain.
This is a mortoria bowl. This is a whiteware, possibly from Oxford, and they normally have a grit inclusion in the actual base, and these are used for mixing, so they'll have maybe greens and stuff like that with olive oil.
There are also goods coming in from further afield.
So here you have a lion attacking another animal. You've got different gladiatorial scenes throughout.
This is a great example of the classic red Roman pottery known as Samian ware.
As it's got the maker's stamp on it. It's been manufactured in Gaul, which is France, modern-day France, from the Roman period.
They're even finding pieces of Roman glass.
You can see some inclusions in it if you look up to the light. There's some little bubbles. But this would have been the neck and possibly comes out to a square bottle.
There's no evidence for glass making from scratch in Roman Britain, so once again this is evidence of luxury goods being imported from across the Roman world. Caught on their dig diary camera, the site is continuing to yield a constant flow of intriguing artefacts.
I'm sticking my neck out on this one, but it could be the...
There you go. Oh, look at that. Maybe that is that.
Like it grew there.
Wow.
Like it grew there, look.
This year, the team are also finding evidence of manufacturing processes taking place within the settlement itself.
We've got a part of a kiln here in situ, and that is the base of it, which would have went across and up to where the white chalk is.
This kiln could have been used to make tiles and pottery for the town, or potentially for export. The finds are helping to paint a picture of this forgotten Roman settlement. The archaeologists have unearthed artefacts that have arrived here from across the Roman world, as well as large numbers of coins. And then there are those road and river access routes. Rob is considering the possibility that this could have been an important trading hub, and possibly even a centre for Roman administration.
The finds indicate that it's an official site. It's under the Roman government's control, so people will be here collecting taxes, or if goods are coming in, looking at what's coming in and what's going out, and see if there's any taxes to pay on that.
With each season, they're discovering that this trading settlement is far larger than previously thought. Rob and his team plan to keep coming back for many years to come.
You never know what you're going to find from one day to the next. You can be, a small bit of pot, or a coin, or a brooch, or, something more personal. It's an amazing feeling.
Leaving the Roman era, we now peer further back into British prehistory. Our next dig sees archaeologists donning scuba gear and plunging into the chilly waters of the Solent to investigate an extremely ancient Stone Age settlement. Just off the coast of the Isle of Wight lies one of the UK's most unusual archaeological sites. Today, a team from the Maritime Archaeology Trust, led by Gary Momber, are planning to survey the site. And they hope to raise what is thought to be an 8,000-year-old timber structure for further analysis.
Pretty good. The first dive of the day. Visibility is a few metres. Tides dropping off, running quite fast. But it's just incredible seeing these lovely layers of trim wood lying flat there. 8,000 years old. First time it's been uncovered. Okay, Dave, they're ready.
And go.
Lying just 11 metres beneath the waves are worked timbers that date back to the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age. The Mesolithic was a time before farming, when the people living in Britain were still nomadic hunter-gatherers.
What I love is really getting on the site and uncovering. It's just finding things for the first time in 8,000 years, and then knowing that that's going to tell us so much about those people.
This site was discovered over 20 years ago by an unusual sort of archaeologist, a lobster.
We saw this lobster kicking out these flints from a hole. I thought, oh, that's really nice. He picked up these little bits of flint and brought them to the surface and said, look, worked flints on the seabed. And that was how we found it.
Well-preserved Mesolithic sites are incredibly rare. Archaeologists often just find scatters of worked flint, like the ones the lobster discovered. But when these archaeologists excavated around the lobster's burrow, they started to find ancient timbers.
There's lots of wood, there's structures being built, there's posts, there are these sort of series of these sort of platforms that are put in place. There seems to be a living spot.
But these ancient structures are under threat. For 8,000 years, the wood has been preserved under a blanket of silt and mud. Now, changing currents are causing extensive erosion along this stretch of coastline, exposing the timbers and leaving the wood open to attack.
As you get these wood-boring organisms, you get piddock and gribble, move into it, dig lots of holes, and you see it in the sample, so everything's sort of compromised and undermined.
Underwater, the divers are completing a survey of the site. It can be a very difficult work environment.
The harder the current is running, the harder it is for you to work. And because you're operating in 3 dimensions, it's not just on a flat surface, you're up and down as well. So it adds challenge to the diving, which is the whole point of doing this really.
The ancient timbers are photographed and each piece logged and tagged. The divers then start to bring them to the surface.
This is the sort of material that we've got on the seabed. And see what they've done is they have got bits of timber and they've sliced it. So it's flat on one side, and on the other side it's sort of bark, another one there. And they've sort of overlaid them to form a sort of layer or platform on the seabed.
The specific purpose of these timber platforms is still unknown, but Gary has a working hypothesis.
We know it was wet around here, but boggy, so they would have been, it would have been a nice platform to stand on and walk on, a dry area for whatever activity they might have been doing.
These Mesolithic people seem to have constructed something quite permanent. This is clearly much more than just a temporary camp. It challenges our ideas about Mesolithic hunter-gatherers as nomads always on the move.
These things are very rare because this was a hunter-gatherer society that was known to move around the place. But here we got, well, it looks more like a settlement. It looks more like there's been a lot of time invested in this particular site. Well, it would have been a special place to live at the time. It would have been a nice little sheltered valley. You're very near sources of flints, just in the chalk cliffs. You would have had wildfowl, you've had vegetation, a place that you could probably live all year round.
Over the course of the day, the divers have been steadily bringing up the whole Mesolithic platform, piece by piece. Coming up from the last dive, Gary brings up the final parts.
That was good. That's the last big piece on top. They've all come up in much more pieces, but this was a big plank sitting on top. Degraded, but it's just one hefty piece of timber. There's just, you know, this whole landscape down there that we really want to, it's just not enough. We need more time. Incredible sight. You know, nothing else like it in the country.
All of the artefacts that were lifted from the seabed are now in the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton, and our roving archaeologist Naoíse Mac Sweeney is visiting their labs.
Okay, yes. So what we're going to do is take you inside.
Excavating an underwater prehistoric site has its challenges, but piecing the finds back together is a whole new headache.
No. So, Gary, what are we doing today?
Well, these boxes contain all the artefacts, all the parts of the platform that we lifted. They've been in cold storage. We're going to get them out now, and we're going to reconstruct them for the first time.
Oh, it's cold. That water's cold.
So we keep them cold and dark and in fresh water to minimise the degradation and to keep them stable for as long as possible. We got to spend time analysing it and recording it. And it's only when we've done that we can extract the information that will tell us about these people, of which we know so little.
They're still really delicate. I guess we have to handle them with a lot of care.
A lot of it's been eaten away by these marine boring organisms. They drill down into it. See the grain of a worm that's gone through. It tracks through here.
The platform is quite a complex structure, made up of several layers of what once was interlocking wood.
We don't have any other blueprints of Mesolithic platforms. This is the first one.
The structure is one thing, but there's also how are they doing it, and how are they converting trees into different sorts of planks, and what tools are they using. So all those sort of questions will come out of this.
Each piece was given a unique number underwater, which we should now be able to match up against the team's photographs. It's quite a challenge to rebuild.
So this is piece 51.
Which is this one here.
That
so
one.
now I have to turn it around the other way.
Right. This one looks like it's 022.
Or 25.
Possibly. 20 smudge. Oh, that's a big bit.
Another one.
There's a big bit. It's a puzzle, and I'm puzzled because it's not just there, it's different layers. Bits go underneath, over each other, they kind of interweave. It's the whole kind of interlocking, interlacing, puzzle-tastic platform.
In trying to put the platform back together, it's apparent to me that this was a well-thought-out and complicated piece of engineering, with multiple layers all carefully cut and fitted together.
This is a pre-settlement phase, and yet you wouldn't expect it from Mesolithic people, from hunter-gatherers. It's just incredible to see it.
No, you thought they just ran around, broke twigs off and built lean-tos and killed the odd animal, but here they were building these complicated structures.
Proper carpentry.
Yeah, and very complicated, as we're finding out.
Despite what seemed to be an insurmountable challenge, we managed to piece back together the 8,000-year-old Mesolithic wooden platform.
That's it there.
Beautiful.
Ta-da.
There it is. Is this the first time it's all been together, reassembled since it came out of the sea?
Yeah, this is it. This is the most complete section we have. And it's, well, to me, it's really impressive. It may look like just loads of bits of wood, but really, I mean, this was made by someone 8,000 years ago, laid out for a purpose we don't know because we know very little about these people.
This is just one part of a massive set of platforms still lying underwater.
We can then start looking at some of the detail on some of the timbers and how they relate to each other. We can try and use that to help sort of interpret the building method.
The platform is a unique find that has advanced our understanding of our nomadic Mesolithic ancestors, clearly showing that they built permanent structures.
The intricacy of this whole platform, this whole structure, has actually been really surprising. The process of putting it back together has helped me to understand the process of how it must have been made, and it was so carefully, beautifully made. It's absolutely jaw-dropping.
Our next dig takes us to southern Dorset and the chance discovery of an extremely rare early Iron Age burial. The dig is taking place in a private cottage garden 8 miles from Dorchester. In 2013, builders were installing a new sewage pipe for a medieval cottage owned by the National Trust. Work came to a halt when they stumbled across some human bones. Archaeologist Dr. Martin Papworth was called in to investigate.
To find a JCB bucket full of bones is an extraordinary thing. Obviously, it doesn't happen every day, does it? And, but it just raises lots of questions, doesn't it? I mean, how old are the bones? Is it one person? Is it several people? And why are they there?
A bone sample sent for radiocarbon testing indicated the burial dated from around 800 BC, the very early Iron Age. In the Iron Age, people were farming the land, living in roundhouses, building hill forts, and starting to use a new metal, iron, for tools and weapons. It's rare to find burials from this period. People may have been cremating the dead and scattering burned bone, or leaving bodies out in the open to decompose. It's taken Martin several years to raise the funds to excavate the site, and now he's back with a team of volunteers. He wants to investigate how the bodies were buried in order to understand the funeral practices of these Iron Age people. Already they're finding that the graves were carefully constructed.
They dug a pit, they've laid the burials or the bones in the pit, and then they've placed the stones over it and buried it. So the stones are the capping to the funeral remains.
Over the next few days, the stones are removed and the full scale of the burials is revealed. Martin has uncovered 3 skeletons. Their size suggests they could have been quite young.
So you have one skull there, another crushed skull here, and on the other side of the pipe trench, you've got another crushed skull here. Each one had a large stone above it. Over the years, as the flesh has rotted from these bodies, that the skulls have impacted and collapsed under the weight of the stones.
The archaeologists are finding something strange about the way the bodies were buried.
There's the skull, there's the teeth, there's the backbone, there's the shoulder, humerus running down through here, a series of ribs, but the whole thing has been caved back in and folded very, very sharply, and these are the 2 legs above the head with the toes of each foot, one above the other. So to get it in that sort of position, you'd have to tie the body up before you put it in the hole, because it's very hard to squeeze someone in that kind of tight angle.
It appears the bodies may have been buried in a tightly crouched position. While crouched burials like this have been found at Iron Age sites in Wales and Cornwall, for Martin, this is a first.
I've been working in Dorset for over 40 years now, and I've never come across anything like this or heard about it. We know that there are rituals where young people are put into the ground as part of a religion. But these people could have been dead some time before they were put in the ground, so that they could be trussed up in these positions. And it could have been a caring thing to do. It may be loving families, placing people in graves in a way they always do. Or it may be something more sinister, maybe something more brutal. All we can do is speculate.
With no grave goods accompanying the burials, the archaeologists are left with many unanswered questions. But they're also left feeling a deep connection with these ancestors.
You get a sense of these are people, and when you spend a day cleaning bones, you do feel rather sort of closer, and you wonder about them and how they interacted with this beautiful place, that they lived here too, though 2,800 years ago.
With the dig drawing to a close, Martin and the team decide to leave the skeletons in their graves, just taking small bone samples for DNA analysis.
We never came here to take the bodies away from their resting place. We just came to take small samples to enable us, the scientists, to talk about the origins of these people. So they will remain here in the ground where we found them. The local people who live in the village have taken this place to heart, and they will look after them in the future.
I'm intrigued to find out more about these curious graves.
We don't have many burials from the early Iron Age.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? It's a very blank sort of period.
But this will be fascinating because if there's good preservation of DNA, then you could sample the whole genome. I'm noticing the arm bone there and the top of that humerus looks as though it's separate. Is that real?
It is, that's right, yes.
So that's a separate epiphysis,
Yes.
which means that bone is still growing.
Yes.
So this is a juvenile. This is
that's
not
right.
an adult.
No.
Yeah.
And they're all young.
Are
They're
they?
all teenagers.
Yeah.
Yes. We'd like to know why these three are together. So, are they related in any way? Are they brother and sister?
You know, with DNA, we should be able to at least start to answer these questions. It hasn't been possible to answer them before. Were there any signs of cause of death at all?
No, that wasn't seen.
So it's quite a strange burial.
They bound them when they buried them, trussed up as tightly as possible, legs and arms like this, perhaps wrapping them in something and then binding it tight and bringing the legs back up like that.
Looking at burial practices like this, it seems very odd to us today. But then, of course, this might be just perfectly normal burial practice, a respectful way to treat the dead.
It's a sort of window into a piece of the past we just don't understand, isn't
Yeah,
it? Which makes it fascinating.
Mudlarking is a practice which has been popular in London since at least the 18th century. People scoured the banks of the Thames looking for valuable trinkets or cargo that had fallen off passing ships. But archaeologists sometimes indulge in a spot of mudlarking as well, and our next excavation focuses on a huge artefact, 24 metres long, a submarine chaser from the First World War. The dig takes place on the banks of the River Thames in Isleworth on the outskirts of West London. A team from the Thames Discovery Programme are investigating a sorry-looking watercraft left to rot in thick mud behind a boatyard. But this wreck has a story to tell. It's the last known example of a First World War watercraft known as a motor launch.
As far as we know, there are no plans in existence for these things. So the only way we can find out how these things were actually built is by digging holes in the mud and trying to record it.
During the First World War, motor launches were part of the Royal Navy's answer to the looming threat of German submarine ambush. On the 7th of May 1915, the Lusitania was torpedoed with nearly 2,000 passengers on board. The ocean liner was ripped in two and sank in just 18 seconds. Over 1,000 people died in the attack. The Navy swiftly placed an order of motor launches with the Electric Launch Company based in America. These fast little boats were armed with depth charges, machine guns and a cannon, and would be sent out to patrol alongside British shipping.
They managed to knock out 550 of these in 488 days. And because the US was neutral at the time, they had to be part assembled in New York, put on railway wagons taken up to Canada for full assembly, and were then shipped across the Atlantic to serve in the North Sea, the Mediterranean, and all around the European coast.
This specific craft was called ML-286. Post-war, she was retired from the military and converted into a houseboat. At some point, she was brought here to the boatyard to be patched up, but sadly the repairs proved too expensive, so she was abandoned and has been here ever since.
We've been here for 7 days, slowly trying to excavate out the middle of her and try and learn some of the constructional details of the vessel.
Each day, the team don't have much time on site. They must gather as much information as possible about this important little vessel before the tide turns. They take measurements and photographs and make drawings to create a detailed plan. But knee-deep in thick mud, this is a far harder task than the average dig.
But I think probably the most challenging aspect of it is it's by far the muddiest site we have, which can be fun. Everything gets covered in mud, but you've just got to embrace the mud. There's no point trying to not get dirty on this side.
All week I kept my feet pretty much dry. I've just filled my whole boot with water. Oh no.
When the order for the motor launches was placed, it was a challenge to deliver the fleet in such a short space of time. With foundries struggling to keep up with demand, even jeweller Tiffany's stepped in to supply brass. But despite the rich benefactors, the team are surprised at the construction.
These upper ribs, these are actually made of sort of really cheap plywood. They're actually held together by bits of ply, which no one knew. We knew they were cheap, we didn't know quite how cheap, but we're finding that out now.
After her duties in World War I, this plucky vessel also served in the Second World War, rescuing British soldiers as one of the little ships of Dunkirk. She was then retired and repurposed to be used as a houseboat on the Thames.
Just trying to piece together or tease out the different bits from the original to what was done when she was turned into a houseboat. People have the time to take and the money to spend, and so you start getting some of the original very cheap fittings, softwood fittings, replaced by this, which is hardwood.
Elsewhere in the hull, the team are uncovering further features.
See, our porthole opens! That's so exciting!
The capstan would have been on the bow of the ship for letting go the anchor and then winding it up again.
With the dig completely dictated by the tides, Elliot must run a tight ship and keep a close eye on the river.
It comes in very quickly. When you're downstream, you've got plenty of warning. Here upstream, you've got no indication. It's running out, and suddenly it's going the other way, and it's coming in quickly. So we've got to get out of the mud and across the river, or else we're camping here tonight.
The team now hope to use their photographs and drawings of this last remaining motor launch to create a detailed record of the structure of this historically important craft. Our next dig is back in Dorset, where archaeologists are investigating a Roman site. It was first dug in the late 1700s when stunning mosaics were found, but we know that they were dug up. We also know that very little attention was paid to what this building actually was, so many questions remain. The excavation is located just outside the village of Frampton, next to the River Frome. Archaeologist Dr. Miles Russell and his team from Bournemouth University are investigating the site. They want to find out about the people who lived here and, if possible, some clues about the relationship between these Romans and the wider local population.
It's a Roman building that's been known for some time, but it's one of a number of extremely late Roman luxury buildings that are occurring in Dorset in the 4th century AD.
This is a late Roman site, dating to some 300 years after the invasion.
Up until this point, Roman activity in Dorset is fairly low-key. There's no real villas until we get to the 4th century, and suddenly they're everywhere. So the real question is, what is happening in Dorset? Why does it take 250 to 300 years, and then there's a sudden explosion of wealth? These are starting to dominate the countryside.
It seems odd that the Romans didn't stamp their mark on Dorset until so late. Elsewhere in England, Romans were building lavish villas and ornate temples. They brought with them a Mediterranean style of architecture with painted plaster walls and elaborate mosaic floors. Back Back at the dig, Miles starts to uncover the footprint of the villa.
You can see where Harry's working down here. He's found this wall. It might be part of this sort of more extensive rooms coming through. That block of stone there, I think, might be part of a step or an entrance structure going up and into the corridor. So it's some kind of formal entranceway here. And then this is a slightly destroyed wall, and you can see we're coming into now mosaic. So this is some of the mosaic that Lyson's recorded in the 1790s. That is very nice. That is amazing. Right. Lovely. Absolutely incredible.
When the mosaics were first revealed in 1794, they were so impressive that King George III came to visit. But they were not preserved in situ and seem to have been taken away as souvenirs. Despite the fact the mosaics are mostly gone, there's still plenty of material on site that could reveal more about who was living here and their status in the community.
It's the rubbish that we're interested in, things that tells us about ordinary lives of people living in this site. So the sorts of things that were not saved during the 1790s dig. This was a large rectangular hollow tile that's built into the walls that conveys heating from under the floor and up through the walls themselves. So this is basically cavity wall heating. So to find these tiles means that we've got a heated room. It's pushing us towards the interpretation that this is the main entertainment space. So it's more information that just wasn't recorded in the 1790s.
Captured here on their dig diary camera, the team are also unearthing evidence that the outside of the villa was richly decorated. This carved sandstone finial would have sat on the apex of the roof.
Wow, that is gorgeous. Dave, I love you. Everything that we're finding from the box-through tiles, which suggests underfloor heating, from the wall plaster, and now also from the pottery and animal bone, it all fits a domestic context. It is a wealthy, high-status building up against the River Frome in quite an exotic and luxurious part of the Dorset landscape.
In amongst the rubble, Miles is also finding intriguing evidence of the people that lived here. One astonishing item even gives us a glimpse of their religious beliefs.
This is a coin of the Roman Emperor Magnentius in about 350 AD. We've got his face on one side, and he was very keen to advertise that he was a Christian emperor. So on the back of his coin, we've got the Chi-Rho symbol, the P and the X. The key thing about this, it's been pierced, so they've worn it around their neck.
The Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in 312 AD. With his backing, this religion slowly spread through the Roman world, reaching even the distant province of Britannia.
And it's a nice little individual find that gives us a little insight to the sorts of religions that were going on here. These are a new wealthy elite that's coming in from another part of the empire, and they're building their luxury houses here, and they're bringing their exotic Eastern faith with them. And it's coins like this that give us that indicator of that sort of personalised aspect of this new religious belief system.
But this opulent villa and its Christian Roman occupants are only a small part of the story of Dorset at this time. At another site not far from the villa, Miles is also finding evidence of the people who lived in the wider landscape here. These people belonged to a tribe called the Durotriges. The Durotriges were one of a number of tribes in southwest Britain at the time of the Roman invasion and occupation. The land of the Durotriges seems to have centred on Dorset, with parts of southern Wiltshire and Somerset as well. But very little is known about their relationship with the Roman Empire. The artefacts Miles has unearthed give us a glimpse into the lives of these people.
The Durotriges, the local tribe, are constantly recycling, reusing, and making sure that everything has a purpose. So this is actually carved out of a sheep bone. You can see it's a comb. Other things that we get from native sites around here, we get lots of spindle whorls. So these are sort of the weights at the end of a spindle during the weaving process. We get no real idea of the range of materials they were wearing. The only real dress indicators that we get are often like this little bronze pins or brooches. This is much like a modern-day safety pin.
It seems that the Durotriges lived peacefully alongside the Roman settlers, but these artefacts appear to show the Durotriges maintained a strong sense of their own identity.
This is probably a wine vessel or possibly an alcohol, sort of a beer or mead cup. It's completely unlike anything that the Roman world is producing. People are using ceramic styles that aren't linked to the Roman Empire. They're using things that are more native design, and they're not high on status symbols.
So despite some Romans building lavish villas in Dorset, Roman culture didn't seem to seep out into the wider countryside.
As far as we can see, the locals here, the Durotriges tribe, didn't embrace Roman culture at all. They don't seem to be impressed by or want to be part of that Roman system. They don't seem to want to be Roman.
I've asked Miles to bring in some of those fascinating finds for closer analysis. So you've got this pattern where you've got very different material culture in the villa compared with sites in the surrounding countryside. What does this tell us about the people of Dorset and how they engaged with being part of the Roman Empire?
I don't think really sort of engaging with it at all. You know, whereas in the East we can see Roman villas, we can see Roman culture, right the way down to native settlements. We've got high status Roman pottery and so on. There's none of that filtering down to the natives here in Dorset.
It's fascinating because it shows us how dangerous it is to look at a scenario in one part of our country and then extrapolate that across the whole nation.
They are existing within the Roman world, but for whatever reason they're not choosing to be Roman.
So what are these objects?
So we've got a range which are all native. We've got sort of combs, we've got spindle whorls. There's a whole range of craft activities.
So are these brooches not Roman then?
No, they're not.
Is that more of a kind of native British design?
Is, yes. I mean, we see these really from about 80 BC onwards. We see them going right the way through the Roman period, but it's not something that is Roman at all. It's not influenced by the Roman world whatsoever.
That's fascinating. So you're seeing a completely different culture.
Yes,
British
I mean, the Roman fibulae are far more decorated, far more sort of squared and really sort of quite chunky status items. These are quite small in comparison.
And then this little bowl, I mean, this is beautiful, but this is very much a British form.
Yes. So that's black burnish ware. It's very highly polished. It's made in southern Dorset right the way up until the 4th century AD. And again, you've got that sort of diamond X-shaped design around the outside.
And it's got this inbuilt strainer on it.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
I really like it. It's beautifully made. And then look at that crazy design on the base.
These are all individual, unique items, so they've got their own personality to them.
These people clearly thought of themselves as being the people of Dorset.
Exactly, and there's no real desire to be Roman. They're paying their tax, they're living within that system, but they're not choosing to become Roman in any shape or form.
They're not adopting that identity?
No.
So even when you've got villas appearing in the countryside, in Dorset, they seem to be capsules of Roman culture. It's not seeping out.
No, it's a little sort of cultural bubble. I think the wealthy are living in their house with their own estate, but their culture's not seeping out to the wider world, and neither is the native stuff coming in. So they are very much sort of excluded between these two separate worlds. There's a sort of almost like a cultural apartheid going on there between these two different cultures.
We know that the Romans and Greeks loved putting on plays, but it wasn't until the 16th century that theatre as we know it really took off in Britain. And the focus of the drama was London, where raucous comedies and historical tragedies were performed in the open air. For our next dig, Naoíse Mac Sweeney joins a team from MOLA, Museum of London Archaeology, as they excavate an Elizabethan playhouse.
The dig takes place in Whitechapel, the bustling heart of London's East End. The impending construction of a new student accommodation block has opened up an exciting archaeological possibility. Records suggest that this was the location of a long-lost open-air theatre, built in the back garden of a popular Elizabethan inn known as the Boar's Head. MOLA were commissioned to investigate.
We're here to see the remains of the Boar's Head Playhouse. We don't know much about it. It's not a Shakespearean playhouse, but we think it was a thriving theatre.
Records reveal that the Boar's Head Playhouse dates from the 16th and 17th century to the time of Queen Elizabeth I. Senior archaeologist Heather Knight is showing me around the site.
Where we're standing now is at the back of what would have been the Boar's Head Playhouse. The stage was under where our machine is now. The tiring house would have been just slightly outside of the site.
What's the tiring house?
The tiring house is like the changing rooms where the actors put on their attire.
And where was the inn, the old inn?
The inn
where
itself
would
would have actually fronted the road, which is Whitechapel High Street. So right down the far side of the site would have been the inn.
Playhouses were at their peak during the 1600s and were sometimes attached to pubs. The theatre at the Boar's Head was one of the earliest known in London. There are records of performances taking place in the pub's backyard, but it wasn't until 1598 that a purpose-built stage was constructed. Digging down some 3 metres below modern street level, the team finally arrived at the site of the pub.
So what we do, we start taking off the top levels using a big machine, and then slowly as we come down we can see from the finds within those layers that we're going back through time, and then when we get back to the 18th century layers we then go to hand digging, and then we work our way down into the 17th century that way.
So can you tell me what we've got here then?
And we're actually standing within the foundations for a building that was part of the Boar's Head Playhouse. So you can stand here looking at actors performing on the stage in front of you.
This rectangular playhouse makes this site distinct from other Elizabethan theatres, which were more commonly built as rounded, enclosed structures. For example, Shakespeare's Globe, which was built 2 years after the Boar's Head Playhouse.
I think the spotlight has been more on Bankside because of the associations with Shakespeare. And I think that's part of the reason the Boar's Head might have slipped off people's radar slightly. It's been overlooked a little bit. So yeah, this is its chance to shine.
For a small fee of 1 or 2 pennies, audiences could enjoy a whole afternoon of entertainment. The combination of performance and beer made for a high-spirited crowd.
I'm looking at some of the plays that were performed here when it was a proper playhouse. They're kind of city plays. They would have really appealed to a city audience. They're kind of scandalous and lampooning public figures. You know, they do push the boundaries a little bit, yeah.
But as the more puritanical mid-17th century approached, there was little tolerance of drunken crowds enjoying raucous satire. At the start of the Civil War in 1642, most of London's playhouses shut down. With closure on the horizon, the Boar's Head landowner saw a development opportunity. The site was split into small plots and sold off. The team have found evidence of what happened next.
Where we're standing now is after the Boar's Head has gone out of use. And this end of the site, we're finding a lot of clay pipe making.
Okay.
And also a lot of pipe clay.
Which is actual pipe clay?
This is actual pipe clay, and it's still really squishy.
So they're using this to make, what kind of pipes? What?
Very
tiny.
It is tiny, and by the shape of the bowl, we know this is 17th century.
What other things were they making around in this industrial area, apart from lots and lots of pipe?
We're also finding evidence for horn working. So you take the useful part of an animal horn, which is that outside coating, it's a bit like your fingernails, and you can kind of peel it and stretch it, and you can make lantern panes because it's translucent. You can also make things like, you know, drinking cups and spoons, and the covers for horn books. So Middlesex Street in the 17th century really does seem to be the epicentre of horn working in London.
After the end of this kind of theatrical period in the site, it then becomes a kind of commercial centre.
It is really industrial, and it's kind of the industries you wouldn't maybe want to live next door to. You know, if you've got pipe kilns, you've got people boiling up animal horns.
Smelly,
smoky.
Yeah,
maybe that's why it's happening on the east side of the city.
As London grew, factories and other manufacturing sites tended to be built on London's east side. It's thought that they were built here to make use of the prevailing westerly winds. This would mean that the smoke and pungent odours were blown away from the city centre.
So what are our finds that we have from the boar's head itself? Well, amongst our sort of selection of finds on the table, the things that are really kind of obviously boar's head are beer mugs. These beautifully black glazed 17th century ceramics. They kind of, originally it would have been quite tall, maybe with another handle, and we're finding lots of those. So what about the industrial installations? We were talking about hornworking, and we obviously get the waste product, which is the inside of the animal horn. These just get thrown away because they have no use for those. The big thing we have going on is clay tobacco pipe making. We have wasters, the ones that have failed the process, and so they've not been smoked really clean on the inside. But on the table here we've got part of that actual kiln fabric. So you can see it's really vitrified from the heat of the kiln, and you can actually see how they've used clay pipes within the fabric of the kiln. It's almost like clay wattle and daub, really. It kind of gives the clay some rigidity in the structure.
To celebrate the site's connection with the city's theatrical heritage, the exposed Elizabethan playhouse will be preserved in situ and incorporated as part of the new development.
We first arrived this morning, I thought it was a hole in the ground. Had no idea what we were going to find at the bottom of it. This kind of politically charged, irreverent kind of theatre scene where people are out there with their beer mugs. I think that's really exciting to get a feel of it here. After the end of the theatrical phase, you have this industrial front to this thriving hub of manufacture. And the small finds from this site really bring the place to life for me, right? You've got the tobacco pipes, hundreds of them, the kind of smoky tobacco, and you've got these beer mugs after beer mugs. This must have been such a raucous pace. It's kind of 16th century EastEnders.
For our final dig, we're revisiting an excavation first filmed by Digging for Britain in 2017. Back then, MOD archaeologists were called in to investigate a small island in Portsmouth Harbour where human bones were eroding out of a cliff. The team discovered 4 sets of human remains, including a skull that had been sawn open.
Got a craniotomy here, so if you can see this cut through the skull.
This year, MOD archaeologist Richard Osgood is back because storms have eroded the cliff face, causing more bones to emerge.
We've got at the moment, I think, 3 or 4 areas of interest that got human remains, and we've got only about 3 or 4 days to get them out.
The dig takes place on Burrow Island, which lies just opposite Portsmouth Historic Dockyard. Richard's filming his dig diary with members of Operation Nightingale. This is a military initiative using archaeology to help the recovery of service personnel injured in conflict.
So here we've got a tibia and a fibula just coming in, going into the side of the cliff there.
That's one lower leg, is it?
Yes.
Is there
that's
just
right.
one that you can see at the moment?
We think we've got the second one just coming through here.
The burials are believed to date from the early 1800s, the late Georgian era. At this time, floating jails called prison hulks were moored in the nearby harbour. These were home to convicts and prisoners of war. The author Charles Dickens grew up in Portsmouth and he knew about these prison ships. It's believed the inmates could have inspired the character of Abel Magwitch, the escaped convict in Great Expectations. Back at the dig, artefacts are emerging that help confirm the date of the graves.
One of the burials, which had just a few bones within it, also produced this really lovely pipe bowl. This is really a date of about early 19th century. It's a good fix for what we're doing on the site.
But as the dig continues, the team make an unsettling discovery. They're finding more graves extending right up the cliff face, far higher than originally recorded.
We're cleaning up the cliff, And perhaps that was an error, because when we've cleaned up the face, there are even more coffins that are being exposed.
This is a new revelation. The burials are stacked one on top of another. The large number of graves suggests that the island was being used as a burial site over many years, longer than previously thought.
So you've got a nice clear coffin that's cutting through this area of the site, but you've got bones either side of it. And what that shows is they've come across an earlier burial and dug it out to put the new coffin in. So this set of human remains is an earlier burial, at least 2 phases of burial here, and it just shows the sheer level of activity of burial on the island.
With the dig coming to a close, the bones are taken away for further analysis. But the plan is that in the future, all the skeletons will be reburied on the island, but on the top, safely away from the eroding cliff edges. I've asked Richard to bring in some of the human remains recovered this year, including one very unusual find.
It's one of the coffins that we saw this year. Actually, there were some other bones that were found as part of that assemblage.
We're still looking at human bones here, but absolutely minute human bones, so an infant. Is that unusual? Have you found any infant remains before on Ross Island?
This is the first time we found something like this, and in many ways that changes our understanding, maybe our picture of what's going on. Does it mean that there's a female convict who went on whilst pregnant, gave birth, and the infant died? Was she incarcerated with an infant? I don't know, but this changes our whole narrative of the site because it's so much younger than anything else.
It's very sad to think about. If it is a female convict with her baby on board one of those prison hulks, there must have been a horrendous place to be. So these are skeletons that have just emerged this year, and there's quite a bit more work still to do on them. But you've been able to advance some of that process with skeletons that have emerged in previous years.
That's right, and I've brought one of them in.
I've seen this one before.
You have seen this one before, but we've got a lot more about this man's story from when he was here last. He's been subjected to some fairly rudimentary early autopsy work.
Yeah.
We've been able to get a company to do a facial reconstruction of him, and you've got it there.
You've brought that along, haven't you? We can see him there. And then if we put the flesh back on the bones, that's what he might have looked like. It's quite strange, isn't it, to see, a face brought back to life in that way.
It's astonishing. It's so realistic, isn't it?
It's quite haunting.
I'd like to think he'd be pleased that we remembered his story and are still telling a bit more about him some 200 years after his demise.
The south of Britain has yielded up a rich diversity of archaeological finds spanning 10,000 years of history. We've travelled back to an ancient Stone Age settlement, marvelled at a Roman trading post, and trodden the boards of an Elizabethan theatre.